how the elite plan and control the destiny of human beings on Earth at least 50 years in advance. Longer than that, but at a bare minimum, 50 years in advance. Hi there, crypto fans. Dick Allgire here in the beautiful Hawaiian Islands. I have kind of a long report today, a very serious subject, and I'm going to show you a document that proves how plans are made at least a half century in advance to control how human beings will live around the planet. In the early 1970s, it was decided that the world would be changed and that the wealth and the industry, the industrial base and wealth of the first world was going to be moved and distributed to the developing nations, the so-called third world, in a way that would change the lifestyles and finances, wealth and living standards of everyone in the first world, and likewise change the living standards of everyone in the third world. All right, I show you this, the Lima Declaration and Plan of Action on Industrial Development and Cooperation. This is from the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. A conference was held in Lima, Peru in March of 1975, and they came up with this plan. The plan was actually formulated beginning in 1972 and 73. In the early 70s, the United States was at the peak of its industrial power. Much of Asia was considered third world. China was mostly agrarian with a peasant population. Vietnam was ravaged by war. Thailand was mostly rice farmers. South Korea, hardworking but poor. All right, quoting from this Lima Declaration. Recognizing the urgent need to bring about the establishment of a new international economic order based on equity, sovereign equality, interdependence, and cooperation. This is 1975. Recognizing that problems of industrial development in developing countries at their present stage of development do not lie entirely in those countries, but also arise from the policies of most of the developed countries, and that without meaningful changes in the economic policies of the developed countries, the achievement of the objectives of a new international order would be in serious jeopardy. Aware that some of the obstacles which are inhibiting industrial expansion in the developing countries are of an internal structure nature, and that there also continue to exist numerous impediments arising from colonial and neo-colonial policies or new forms of dependency. Convinced that the establishment of a new and just international economic order based on the common interests and cooperation of all states can only be achieved through the equitable participation of the developing countries in the production and exchange of goods and services in order to achieve just and equitable international economic relations. And here are the UN set goals. That in the view of the low percentage share of the developing countries in total world industrial production, recalling General Assembly Resolution 3306 of 14 December 1974, and taking into account the policy guidelines and qualitative recommendations made in the present declaration, their share should be increased to the maximum possible extent and as far as possible to at least 25% of total world industrial production by the year 2000, while making every endeavor to ensure that the industrial growth so achieved is distributed among the developing countries as evenly as possible. This implies that the developing countries should increase their industrial growth at a rate considerably higher than 8%, recommended in the International Development Strategy for the Second United Nations Development Decade. So, in the early 1970s, the GDP of the first world countries was very high, their output. The third world countries was very low. The United Nations, the elite of the world, put out this document setting goals 25 years in the future to bring down the industrial production of the so-called first world and bring up the GDP to a level of 8%, which is what we saw in China. So here you see the result. This is Shanghai in 1990, and then Shanghai just 20 years later. In 1974, the world elite were designing how the world would be in the year 2000 and beyond. And so now what they've decided is they are going to homogenize the population. They're bringing in citizens from around the world into Europe and North America and the United States, the formerly United States. They want to change the demographic makeup, and they're doing it right before our eyes. This is a plan. It's been long in progress. You're not going to stop it. They had a plan in 1972 for what 2020 would look like. I just read it to you. And they have a plan now. It's well underway for what 2030 and 2050 and beyond will look like. The program is underway. It's long planned. There are powerful forces that are implementing this. If you want to know more about how this works and how you can cope with it, where the world is going and how you can navigate this new world, we invite you to join our private site, futureforecastinggroup.com. futureforecastinggroup.com. Get a $25 membership, or better yet, get a visionary membership, and look at some of the tremendous library of materials we have, talking about things like this, about where we're going, who controls it, how they guide it, and what's going to be happening. All right? That's my report. I'll try to do something not quite so heavy next time, a little more lighthearted, hopefully. Let's go cryptos. Come on, Bitcoin.